Alright, guys, so today we're going to talk about the UFC betting scandal that occurred over the weekend at the UFC Apex card, the 1 millionth one. I don't know how many are there at this point. But so this happened on one of the main card fights between Isaac Dolgarian and Yadir Valle, where, as you can see at the bottom here, on close, Dolgarian was the favourite, Diwali was the underdog, but that's still like a fair amount. At plus 220 is quite a big underdog, or fairly big underdog, moderate. But basically, what happened is right before the fight, a lot of money was placed on Diwali to win, and there was also information apparently that had leaked from Bulgarian's camp or something like that. Maybe he was injured or something like that, and someone had placed a bet, a big. I can't remember how much it was. I don't think the exact figure was disclosed, but the betting line basically shifted because this guy put on a bunch of money, shifted to Bulgarian then being the underdog and Diwali being the favourite, and then obviously Diwali won. Diwali won. He won in the first round by submission, and it's just blown up. Like this is all over MMA news, UFC news, where just to talk of this kind of betting scandal, and obviously if you remember that, I think it was 3 years ago, November, December 2022, there was this other scandal that occurred for James Krause, the MMA coach, who he had a fighter, and I think it was just before his fight, there was the exact same thing happened. A bunch of money was placed on by multiple people on this guy's opponent to win. I can't remember the guy's name. It was like something, uh, something I can't remember. It started with a D, I think, but and then he lost, and there was a whole investigation into this guy James Krause because he actually had like some YouTube channel where he done like betting analysis and blah blah blah, and it was like this was really sketchy. This guy's doing betting analysis, and his fighter lost when there was a bunch of money placed on his opponent, and then there was a whole investigation by the UFC, by I believe, the police. I want to say, and no one's really heard of him since then. He was banned from UFC events, banned from. I think he was banned from his own. I think commissions started banning him as well. Like they just didn't want any of that. So that was bad for him, and it's just kind of going off what has just happened now. It's like this will be bad for this guy Bulgarian if he's found guilty. So this happened, and I kind of wanted to just talk about the what has because what this has done is kind of revealed maybe has this been going on a lot more than we think? Not just because this has been really suspicious, like this has been kind of front and center with that whole bet being placed and blah blah blah, but it's like how many times does this happen more than we think in the UFC? And it just goes under the radar. Maybe this time it has just been really they made it really obvious by mistake, and they've blown their cover. Let's just say the people who organized this uh, possible match fixing sport betting scandal. And what had happened was so basically what happened was uh, the Nevada State Athletic Commission had withheld Bulgarian's entire purse for the suspicious activity. Obviously, he will be paid that if he's found innocent. There's not enough evidence, but if not, obviously he's gonna go to jail and not get the money for his fight. And so they've held that, and I think in last night on Sunday he was, or not last night, but on Sunday he was cut from the UFC because the UFC want nothing to do with that. Maybe the UFC will rehire him. They'll sign him again if he's found to be innocent, and it could have just been some big coincidence or misunderstanding. So that happened. He's not getting paid. And then not Dana White, Ariel Huane came out today and said that the Bulgarian situation is not an isolated incident. He said he's spoken to many people, multiple people who have experienced, who like fighters or coaches that have had people come up to them and said, "Oh, throw your fight and I'll pay you a lot of money." And this is, you could have guessed this maybe with a couple, but he said it's like you know it's probably quite a lot to be fair, because the UFC is a really big sport now. MMA in general is a really big sport, and it'll be the same in boxing as well. But match fixing and all this stuff's fight fixing will be very common probably, just especially with lower ranked fighters. You'll get, see, fighters, if you're just coming in the UFC, maybe you're not that good, maybe you've lost a few fights, maybe you've won a couple, maybe you're like kind of even, right? You're probably not going to have, you're realistic, you're not going to be able to go make it big, like, get top 10, even ranked. And so you're going to be stuck. If you're even just a kind of one in one fighter, as in you win a fight, lose a fight, you might be in the UFC for a bit, but you're not going to be like getting that much money. You might, at most, you might hit like, what, 60k win money, some like 60 win, 60 shows, 60 win. So you're not going to be making that much money. So, maybe these people come to, these shady figures come to these kind of UFC fighters that, maybe are a bit desperate for money. Maybe they're still in their, 20 and 20k to show, 20k to win. And they're like, oh, throw your fight, or, and what, I'll give you, 50k, 100k even, depending on how big the odds are, depending on what the odds are like. And this could be quite enticing to these fighters, as I'm sure that's a lot of money to them, and they're probably thinking, oh, I'm not really going to make it in the UFC anyway, so might as well. But this situation, this Bulgarian situation, is just kind of showing what can happen if that gets found out. And I'm in no doubt that UFC fights have been. This has happened in many UFC fights, but it just hasn't been found out. Maybe it's done in a more a proper way, where it's been less noticeable, or just obviously not noticeable at all. Not been, it's been invisible. That obviously we'd be hearing more about this if it wasn't. But it just kind of got me thinking that this probably has happened a lot, and it's not even just for fighters, it's also for referees and judges. Think of how many judges have, think of like a decision. How many decisions where you thought, oh, that is a like cut and dry, that guy's won. But then you have like out of nowhere some judge gives it like to the other guy, and it's a split decision and blah blah blah. But you've got to think, it's like, no way that can just be down to judge incompetency. Like, sometimes you got to think, maybe maybe this guy has been paid. Like, there's that possibility. There's a chance that has happened. You know what I mean? And referees as well. Think of one of a recent example was, I think it was Muhammad Yahya. I think that's his name. He fought on the Saudi Arabia card in summer. He It was that one where he got knocked down 6 times. Like, it was a new UFC record, and the referee, I can't remember who it was. It was it Herzog? I don't think it was. No, I don't think it was Herzog. I think it may have been someone else. But it was like he got knocked down 6 times, and it made it to the second round. And it's like, what if like some guys come to the referee and been like, if you let this fight go on, and get it to past 1.5 rounds, or get it into the second round, or you know what I mean, or how many knockdowns, like get it to 4 knockdowns, 4.5 knockdowns, 5.5 knockdowns, right? And so it's could be referees as well. Like, there's obviously, back in the day, obviously you had like Mario Yamasaki and, was it Steve Mazzagatti? They might have just been bad at their job, but there's a possibility they were into it as well. You never know. You never know. But and then the next thing was, this was an example that fighters, because this was such a big news, and it was like big story, this Bulgarian thing. A lot of former fighters, or even active fighters, had said that they had been approached by people to throw their fights. There was this one where, oh, it was this one first, but so Vince Morales, he said that, all this throwing the fight stuff is crazy. I've been approached about doing it, and it's not something I could live with, even though I ended up losing the damn fight anyways. And he said, someone asked, how much were you offered? And he said $70,000. So, yeah, so he didn't take it because, one, he said he wouldn't be able to live with it. Like, he felt really guilty. But two, he also said that 70K, which in a vacuum, obviously on its own, $70,000 is a lot of money. However, if you get caught, $70,000 that's all going away. Obviously, you won't get it. Obviously, all your bank account's gonna, if you get investigated because of that, your funds are gonna get frozen, your bank account gets frozen, and then if you're found guilty, and then obviously, even if you just had that money anyway, you'd need to spend so much in lawyers' fees because you're gonna get challenged in court by the federal government and the UFC themselves. So yeah, it's just not worth it. 70K is probably not worth it for what the trouble, well, the risk essentially it would bring, and and what who else was it? This one, Vanessa Demopoulos, who's actually I don't think she's ranked. She's women's flyweight. I want to say I can't remember. I think she's flyweight, but she got she said she also got approached. She said, yeah, people have approached me through fights. Also, my integrity could never. We spent our lives learning skills and honouring the sport. Can't believe people are compromised their morals like this. She obviously didn't say how much she was offered, but she said that people have approached her. And these are the kind of fight, when I was saying, like, the fighters that are alright, but they're not that good. These are the kind of people, like, people that are maybe just outside the rankings, but can't get in. They've tried, but they can't. They just keep losing, and then maybe they win one, and then lose one. And they're not on that much money. But they are the kind of prime example, or prime targets, specifically for uh, to be asked to throw their fights. Obviously, they said they have integrity and blah blah blah, and that's obviously a good thing. But it is like, how much has this actually happened? Because there is a lot of shady decisions and blah blah blah, or not decisions. Oh yeah, well, decisions by the judges, right? But it's also, well, that also gets into the point. It's like, fighters can throw the fights, but or can't throw the fights, but you do get a lot of shady things where the UFC, it's like, oh, somehow the fan favorite fighter, the UFC, the profitable fighter wins and blah blah blah. That's a whole other conversation for another video. But the UFC fixed their own fights, but that's kind of obvious. There's been a lot of, especially when Adesanya was champion, they were throwing about 49-46 scorecards and 50-45 scorecards, blah blah blah, for him, and there was a couple others I can't specifically name, but it's always the Paddy Pimblett one against Jared Gordon. That one was a bit suspicious. Both examples being that the winning fighter was the fan favorite, the star essentially. O'Malley? Yeah, the O'Malley Yan as well. Like, they were close. Obviously, some of them were close, but you know what I mean. But anyway, that's a topic for another video. So yeah, so this was the betting scandal, the Bulgarian Diwali betting scandal, and we'll see when more information comes out, and keep a close eye on it. It'll be interesting to see. Actually, maybe it won't be for a while because, I mean, if it is actually getting investigated, that takes like months, years even. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of what to talk about today, and I will. Oh, sorry. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and it really helps out. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.